Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Frederick Community College Mid-Atlantic Center for Emergency Management and Public Safety Reclaiming Humanity series. This is our third event in this series, and we've developed it to be a public safety academic and practitioner collective. And through this leadership forum, we wish to inspire our senior public safety and academic leaders to have the great discussions regarding the challenges that are facing our nation today in this field. The challenges also bring opportunities to work together to enhance public trust and to better learn the role of academia in bolstering that public trust. So today is all about public safety relations and strengthening our current relationships and creating new ones to lead us into complex problems in the future. And we have three esteemed guests with us today. And I'll start with Mr. Mark Hubbard, Deputy Director of Maryland's Office of Homeland Security, who will help us facilitate. And I'd like to begin by introducing our first speaker. We'll introduce our speaker, we'll ask a question, and then we'll flow and introduce the next speaker as well. So first we're going to begin with Chief Steve Lohr. Steve Lohr serves as the Chief of the Hagerstown Fire Department in Washington County, Maryland. He's been instrumental in developing standard operating guides, developing a standard incident command framework, and improving fire rescue infrastructure in and around the city of Hagerstown. Prior to his appointment in Hagerstown, Chief Lohr held every rank in the Montgomery County, Maryland Fire Service and Rescue area and had the honor of retiring with over 30 years of career service. So thank you for your service, Chief Lohr. Chief Lohr was actively engaged in the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, Fire Chiefs Committee, and the Regional Fire Intelligence Group. Chief Lohr is a graduate of the University of Maryland Fire Protection Engineering Program, the Executive Fire Officer Program at the National Fire Academy, and the Executive Leaders Program at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. In addition, he holds 2 associate's degrees and several leadership program certificates. Chief Lohr is a life member of the National Fire Protection Association, an active member of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and the Society for Fire Protection Engineers. He is also actively serving with the NFPA Research Foundation, the Insurance Services Office, and the American Wood Council's recently formed Fire Service Advisory Council. Welcome, Chief Lohr. We're honored to have you, and we are delighted that you also have a career of public safety, education, and training and experiences, all to improve all our fire service in Maryland and nationwide. With that, I'm going to sit back and let Mark Hubbard begin with our first questions.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for joining us, Chief Lohr. The question for you is, reflecting upon your experiences of leading fire services in both rural and urban areas, would you please describe your successful strategies to build community trust in public safety in 2 very different service areas of Maryland?
I'd be happy to, and I would certainly like to thank not only Kathy, but Frederick Community College for allowing me this opportunity. I tell everybody as I get near and nearer to retirement, I've had shifts that I was glad to see come to an end, but I've never tired of going to work in public safety. And I think that that's as important as anything in terms of your view of the world and how things are. I see former mentor and part-time boss Steve Carter is on the line. I want to acknowledge Steve and thank him for the guidance he provided to me as a young man when I was teaching part-time for him more than a minute ago. Is that fair enough, Steve? So nonetheless, whether you're in Montgomery County, Maryland or Hagerstown, Maryland, 2 very different communities, I would identify a couple things. First of all, you have to know your community. And by that, I mean the good parts of the community, the not so good parts of the community, and in some cases, the ugly parts of the community. And it's always been my goal, whether I served as just a small line firefighter, EMT, or company officer, chief of the department, to be fully engaged in that community. That's a little bit of a departure from when I first come to work many, many years ago. You know, fire rescue in particular, I'll never forget my first day on the job in the career side of the business. I had an old guy that never finished high school. He was very good at his craft, and he was kind of breaking me in and telling me how things were going to be. And he said, look, it's really this simple. They call, we haul, that's all. And I've never forgotten that simple advice from a guy that was really, really good at what he did, although he didn't buy into many of the things that we do today in an all hazards mission. We have to have both emergency and non-emergency contacts. I think historically, fire rescue, like law enforcement, like many other public safety agencies, always focused on the emergency service delivery and not so much on the day-to-day relationships that turn a bad day into a better day when people are in trouble. So if you know your community, all aspects of the community, you accept the community for what it is and strive to make things better by being fully engaged. I think it's a leader's job, and I love the title of this program, Reclaiming Humanity. I just can't think of a better way to frame this whole conversation. Leaders have to set high expectations for all their personnel to excel at customer service. And what I've learned over the years, what I've been taught over the years by many, many strong leaders is that it's always citizens first. We work for the citizens. And if you lose that track, if for some reason you think you are more important or anybody in your organization is more important than the citizens you serve, you're probably in the wrong business. And so I encourage everybody to make sure you just keep reminding yourself that. Along with that is the simple thing that hopefully most of us learned in grammar school or elementary school, someplace, kindergarten maybe. Just be nice until you can't be. And there are times in this business, particularly on the law enforcement side of public safety, where you can't be nice. I remind our people, every recruit I've ever talked to, that look, we're invited guests at people's homes, the fire rescue component of public safety. Many times when law enforcement shows up, they have to show up with a warrant. So they are unwanted and uninvited guests. And if we do anything to violate that trust, that sacred public trust, then shame on us. It's going to get us in trouble somewhere down the road. One of the things I've done here that they had never done in the past was insist that they establish relationships across the community with political leaders, with business owners, and just the everyday people in the street. This was one of those starchy old fire departments here in Hagerstown where it was easier to keep them in the firehouse, not let them loose in the community until they were needed. And I took an opposite path here, and I think we've had some success because of that. People want to see their fire department. They want to establish relationships on a good day so that on game day, it's not a strange situation for them. Mark, I hope that answered the question.
It does. It's a walk down memory lane for many of us in this session today, and seeing the neighborhoods, the communities change, society changing, which is brings into your culture the need to change as well. So thank you so much for those thoughtful and reminiscent and candid comments to answer that first question. Kathy, back to you.
Thank you so much. And Chief, I'm going to expand just a little bit. You recently led the response to a major fire, house fire, loss of life in city of Hagerstown. And I observed, just because I'm in the community, the outreach actions and the that your officers and firefighters took after this event. You want to talk a little bit about how you strengthened the community after they faced something so horrific?
Yeah, so one of the programs that we do here is called After the Fire. And generally, if we have a significant fire in any neighborhood of the city, COVID aside, we broke our own COVID rules this time because of the seriousness of the event. Those of you that might not be familiar, we had 3 fatalities in a single family dwelling. And it was a particularly horrific fire for a community here in the west end of Hagerstown. So we typically, after any major fire, visit the neighborhood by the same shift that was working the day or night of the fire 3 days later. We go door to door with free smoke detectors and engage residents in conversation about fire safety. We offer to check their smoke detectors to see if they're working. If they're not, we install one and make sure that they're not sleeping without a smoke detector any longer. We have partnerships with the American Red Cross, with home improvement stores, both Lowe's and Home Depot here in the area. And what we found is that is a form of healing for the people in the neighborhoods who knew these people intimately. It gets that fire safety message across in a way that, you know, you could show photos and videos and all those other things, but when they can see, touch, and interact with other humans about this thing, it's really good. But, you know, not only that happens, that kind of fatality does not happen often, but in terms of those kind of fires without fatalities, we do that about 40 or 50 times a year here in Hagerstown. But we participate fully in, for instance, Washington Goes Purple. It's not a proud thing, but in the city of Hagerstown, if anybody fails to recognize that addiction is not one of the largest problems in this community, then they don't know their community, back to my first point. So every Friday, the entire Hagerstown Fire Department wears purple golf shirts plastered with prevent addiction, all kind of addiction, alcohol, opioid, mental health addictions. So what I like to say is we are aware, we're involved, we're trying to be nice out in the community and get that message across any way we can. How we measure that, you know, as a management guy, I'm not sure we really can, but I will tell you that the interactions I have with our citizens, that they're proud that their fire department's thinking about them and that they're engaged in what they're engaged in, even if it's not the pretty shiny thing that everybody would like their community to be.
Thank you very much for sharing that example. Wonderful example of public-private partnerships at work. And that leads me to our next presenter. Miss Allegra Tartaglia is the Business Engagement Manager at the Maryland Emergency Management Agency. And she's going to tell us her new title and new position very shortly. She is responsible for leading the private and public partnership entitled Private Sector Integration Program within the Non-Governmental Services Branch and managing the Maryland Business Emergency Operations Center for the COVID-19 response and statewide vaccination, as well as any impending state emergency activations. She's a busy lady, so thanks for joining us. Prior to joining MEMA, Allegra was the disaster specialist and the special project support for the Pittsburgh Foundation, where she established the Emergency Action Fund for national and local crisis and the Pittsburgh Foundation Emergency Preparedness Standard Operating Procedure for continuity of operations and employee safety. Allegra's accomplishments include an environmental risk assessment for the city of Pittsburgh, an environmental restoration project in Cuba, and proposed an environmental impact assessment policy for the Environmental Protection Agency in Brazil. She also supported the Italian Civil Protection Department with volunteer and donation management operations during the 2016 Central Italy earthquakes. Allegra holds a Master of Arts in International Development and Governance, International Public Management from the University of Pittsburgh, Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. And Allegra, we welcome you. So first, let's just begin, and you can tell us about your new position and describe the PSIP program a little more, and then I'll follow up with your question.
Well, thank you for the beautiful introduction, and I welcome everyone today. My new position is the Non-Governmental Services Branch Manager. So as it was introduced in my bio, MEMA has recently created a new branch for any entity engagement with non-governmental entities. So that includes private sector, nonprofit, and volunteer sector. The reason being is prior to the creation of this branch, the engagement with the private sector was under the communication and outreach, because initially the thought process was not only should we do targeted outreach for emergency preparedness to the whole entire community and to citizens, but specifically to businesses, since they are the backbone of our economy and most people get their information from their employers. Also, because businesses themselves have been better assessing their continuity of operations based on incidents that have occurred to them in other states that have been having incumbent disasters, such as Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, Hurricane Mary in Puerto Rico, and the wildfires in California. So MEMA wanted to build that relationship with the private sector to help them, to provide them products and resources and training materials so that they could better plan and better expand their continuity operations so that they can be operational and ready to self-serve themselves in the event of an emergency and keep their employees safe. But at the other hand, we realized that private sector can't do it alone, just how public sector can't do it alone, meaning there needs to be involvement also from nonprofit organizations and volunteer organizations to respond to the incident. And thus being the idea of creating a whole entire branch that focused on engagement with these three entities, but also building programs to continue the relationship and to create private-public partnerships, so P3 programs and projects that could help with emergency response and recovery. So that's the new branch, and my new position would be managing my previous position, which is the Business Engagement Program Manager, and then the Nonprofit and Volunteer Engagement Program Manager.
Thank you for that, Allegra. Allegra, we have watched you flourish in your position since you arrived in Maryland, and we are delighted at the success. And we saw you build this whole program, the state's private sector in the development and the MEMA PSAP program. You want to talk to us a little bit about how did you get started and how did you make all those great connections? And then talk a little bit more about the information that's provided by this program, because it is remarkable and I benefit from it, and some others right here on the call do get your regular information too.
Thank you, Kathy. So I arrived at MEMA right out of graduate school, but I wanted to leverage my previous experiences and also my life experience of being a military brat into getting into a position where I did not know much about the state or the position itself, in the sense of I was given the understanding that there was already established program, the private sector integration program, that had already been conducting years of outreach with the private sector, but the membership wasn't growing as much. And the reason being was it was hard to understand what the public sector wanted, so what our state agencies needed and needed benefit from the private sector, and also what the private sector wanted and needed in order to be successful in their response and their business continuity. So the first thing I did was, like I always did moving around in various military bases, was understand the lay of the land. getting to meet people first on the public sector side of things. So I needed to build the relationships not only internally to MEMA at the Maryland Emergency Management as an organization, but also with the other state agencies that represent, that have a spot in our state emergency operations center. So we do not follow the ICS system, which is the incident command system. We follow the state coordinating function system, where we have individuals from each state agency that have an operational component in response that can target the FEMA lifelines, the Federal Emergency Management Agency's lifelines, which usually are energy, shelter and food, transportation, utilities, and security. I believe there are 5, unless I'm missing one. And so the point was, once I had established the relationships with the state coordinating function representatives. So for example, a state coordinating function is Department of Human Services. Well, Department of Human Services on a daily basis conducts social programs in our communities. What does that mean? They work with health networks, in and out home patient cares, feeding organizations, et cetera, to get their programs successfully through and servicing the community. They also work with providing shelter during an emergency. And so they already have connections in their programs with the private sector community. So what I wanted to do was any information that I received at the county, state, and federal level that were training opportunities, resources targeted to businesses, funding opportunities targeted businesses, I leveraged the already existing partnerships that the state coordinating functions had, and also the already established private sector integration program members had. So for example, Kathy, you were one already of our well-established private sector integration program member who had relationships with other entities within your realm. And so we would push out information sharing and like I said, opportunities for training and exercise to constituencies. And as we shared that information, the individuals would start pushing that forward to their network. And as individuals and businesses saw how useful the information was, they started requesting appointments and opportunities to meet to understand more about the PSIP program and how they could benefit from the program and what capabilities they could offer. But subsequently, when I started having those meetings with the private sector businesses, small, medium, and large, I started realizing that private sector always wants to understand how they can produce something, how they can help and assist, because it is to their benefit to take action so that they can move forward. Either they have a financial incentive, may it be even continuity of operations because it's safeguarding their economics and their business plan, but also they might have a social corporate responsibility that they want to engage. So my question started, I started shifting my elevator pitch when I started speaking to the businesses and saying, this is MEMA, this is what we can provide for you, but what do you need from us? But also what capabilities can you provide for contract, lease, or donation? And I started explaining to them that this information was useful not only to share with us at the state level, but also with county governments, because as the state, we are involved in many meetings around the county and with various different organizations, and we started understanding where there are gray areas. And once you have a portfolio of understanding where businesses can provide support for contract, lease, or donation, you can basically fit those puzzle pieces in those conversations that are being held across the board. So naturally, the relationship started to build, the interest started to expand, and the usefulness started to be understood both on the public sector side and the private sector side, because every time I had a conversation with both sides, I set expectations, and I basically was a conduit for both entities. And I would continue by saying this assisted us with providing a well-established understanding of what we could do as our operational unit, which is the Maryland Business Emergency Operations Center, during COVID-19 response, which was basically being first and foremost, an information sharing and a platform for the private sector into government to ask questions, to provide supply chain inquiries, and also to assist with policy making. But on the flip side, to be a resource for public sector when they couldn't find any public sector capability support to a response, and to inquire with the private sector if there was an opportunity for them to intervene.
Thank you so much. How many members do you have now? Will you refresh my memory?
I started off in January 2019 with 300 members. In 6 months, we grew 600 members, and currently we have more than 1,000 members.
Congratulations, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Yes. So I'd like to introduce you to our next presenter, Lieutenant Latoya Gray. Lieutenant Gray proudly serves as the Media Relations Coordinator with the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Lieutenant Gray began her career as a correctional officer. Her responsibilities expanded, and she assumed the responsibility for the facility's weapons and equipment. Additionally, her leadership was recognized as she undertook the roles of field training coordinator, and instructor for the institution. Rising to the rank of sergeant, she assumed responsibility for the all-male maximum security ward and staff of 4. During her tenure, she accepted the role of human resources staffing specialist and assumed the responsibilities for correctional officer recruitment. During this time, the MACEM&PS Public Safety had the privilege of connecting with then Sergeant Gray, and we sought career opportunities for students and enhanced our advisory committee. When Latoya received her commendable promotion to lieutenant, she made history as the first uniformed officer as the spokeswoman of the department. In this role, she addresses all media concerns involving the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Lieutenant Gray also attended the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. So welcome, Lieutenant Gray. And Mark, I'll bounce to you for some questions.
Thank you, Kathy, and it's very nice to meet you, Lieutenant Gray. And my question for you is, would you please address how building public trust is related to recruiting quality employees in public safety and specifically in corrections?
Sure. I would like to say first, thank you so much for having me represent the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. It's rare that we have the opportunity to share with our audience what actually goes on behind closed doors. Of course, we are a plant, I would say, in our own life. You know, we have a situation where people really don't know what goes on behind what we do on a day-to-day basis. So to answer your question, Mr. Hubbard, professional appearance, attitudes, as mentioned, is customer service, ethics, it shows the public that we have quality people and high standards. The more that they will be convinced that we do hire good people. Their trust in us hopefully will increase. Transparency as well in sharing information and clearly spoken goals to help foster trust as well. As we all know, the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, has affected our lives in ways that we once felt that it wouldn't happen. With that, we had to trust science. You know, we had to trust science because we were unaware of what was moving forward. And it's the same way in corrections. The public have to trust us. And in order for them to trust us, we have to be out in the community, engaging in the community, providing them with as much information as we can, because of one, their loved ones are in our custody. And of course, we don't want the public to feel that they're in a situation where they can't trust us.